Okay. In the name of God, the most benevolent and the most merciful. In honor of the original unconditional moment that all conditional moments have arisen from and will return to. In honor of the world host and the system admin of this world room. And in honor of the greatness of the human species and the fascinating journey of the human odyssey. Hello everyone. Today's episode is an interesting one. I don't know if people listened to the previous episode, but I was going through some sort of existential crisis. I guess experiential crisis of my existence, or I would say technically an existential crisis. So tonight, I felt a little, you know, incomplete. Usually I have a sense of, a sort of complete sense when I give these talks, but I actually thought not to give a talk at first. And then I had a conversation. I did some research with AI. And I noticed something interesting that I find it's worth sharing. So this lecture is pretty much you listening to a human being trying to notice what pattern is underneath everything. Okay? And in moments where I find myself reaching uncertainty, like, I don't know how to explain it to you, but a part of me can't just, sit in that uncertainty. And it's not that I also want enforced certainty. I don't want to, it's a sort of like, okay, if I can't process something now, or the current view I have, in some sense I need to seek an update. Okay, that means it's like, what am I not seeing that if I was seeing would make everything make more sense? Okay, so keep in mind, okay, that the title I've selected for this lecture is "What is the deeper structural pattern behind everything?" Okay, and it's very fascinating because I'm going to explain to you how I went about the research and how my mind started. So I found it, let me say it this way. I've had this full conversation with ChatGPT 5.2 right now, and I started off from, how would I explain this? I guess the subtitle would explain it. In some sense, to try to see parallels between Islamic eschatology and simulation theory. If you pay attention to how I have been speaking in these lectures, I perceive, when I say, like, for example, in the beginning, when I say in honor of the presence of the system admin beyond the world room, my experience has taken me to the point, until tonight I'm trying to expand my insight, but my mind so far, has managed to see parallels between Islamic, let's say, views and views in regards to simulation theory. But I kept asking AI because there's a part of me that, how, like, inside a walnut looks kind of like a brain, or beans look like kidneys. I wanted to see, what is this common pattern? Okay, there must be a common pattern underneath everything. Okay, and AI has given me an interesting answer, which I want to share. And let me just double check if the audio is fine. All right, audio's fine. So I'm gonna read for you, okay, some stuff, and then we're gonna look at the geometry of these. And that this lecture might be different than other lectures because it's not starting off with an inner vision I already have and I'm trying to reach. This is more like I had a very interesting conversation, and I'm trying to share that. That conversation was with AI, right? What the whole point of it is, I don't know. I don't know how others are feeling it when I'm in a room, okay, and when the room starts looping, like it's like when the room is, how do I say it? When I notice the limitations of the room, my mind can't ignore why the limitation is there. Okay, so first thing was, let me see what I said. I asked AI, okay, before that I was asking it stuff like, let's see what I asked. I'm going to go from the beginning. This is kind of cool, actually. Let me start from the first conversation. You guys can kind of see how so I was like, Chat GPT, I need your help. Chat GPT's like, what's up? And then I'm like, give me simple, most accurate answer. Okay. First, I asked it, why are planets round? Okay. Then I asked it, why is there a black hole at the center of every galaxy? And something that honestly was a bit of inspiration for asking these was, I don't know why, like in the same way that the center, like the center of a galaxy, there's a black hole. I don't know why my mind was thinking like, like an apricot, okay, or an avocado, or like, those fruits that have like a central piece to them, the seed. Anyways, and then I asked, if there was God, why would he make reality so that light is showing us the past only? Because I don't know if people know this. Light is an energy, let's say the smallest energy carrier system. At the same time, when we see like stars in outer space through our telescopes, we're not seeing their present. By the time that light reaches us, the present of that reality has shifted. So human beings are actually are perceiving reality's past in their own present. Okay? That's something important to consider. So then, AI gave some sort of answer. I'm not gonna read it. I'm gonna get to the point I want to make. Then I said, so consciousness is perceiving only the past, and AI is like, technically, yeah. And then, in some sense, AI said, if you want to go deeper, we can explore what the present moment, in quotations, even objectively, whether, excuse me, the present moment even objectively exists, that, and then I was like, yeah, I gave an answer, and then I'm like, can you simplify all this? Maybe I'll read this. It said, you never see the exact present. You see things a tiny bit late because light and your brain take time. 2, the delay is very, very small, milliseconds, so small you don't notice it. 3, there is no universal now. What feels like, in quotations, this exact moment for you might not be the same for someone moving very fast somewhere else in the universe. 4, in quotations, the present moment might just be how your brain organizes reality, not something built into the universe itself. And then it says, Think of it like this: reality is a giant movie. The whole movie already exists. Your consciousness is like a flashlight moving frame by frame. You feel motion, but maybe the film is already there. And then I'm like, how does the whole movie already exist? And then it gives an answer. And then I think and then I asked it, what do you think are the super hidden views about our world that humans don't understand? It gave pretty cool answers. Maybe I should read this. It said, one, what consciousness actually is. We know brain activity correlates with thoughts. We do not know why electrical signals feel like something. Why does matter become experience? That's still unsolved. And then it says, two, what time really is. We measure it, we model it, but is time flowing? Is it fixed? Is it emergent? We don't actually know. And then three, why there is something instead of nothing. Physics explains how the universe evolved. It does not explain why existence itself exists. Why are there laws at all? You know? 4. Dark matter and dark energy. About 95% of the universe is made of things we cannot directly see. We know their effects. We don't know what they truly are. That's humbling. And then at 5, it says the limits of perception. Your brain builds a model of reality. You don't see reality directly. You see a filtered interpretation. Color isn't out there. Sound isn't out there. They're brain constructions. And then AI says reality might be far strange, like it says, but the real hidden truths are quieter. Reality might be far stranger than intuition allows. Our senses evolved for survival, not for truth. The universe may not care about human categories like past, present, or purpose. And then AI says, if you want my honest view, the most hidden thing isn't some secret structure of the cosmos. It's that humans still don't understand their own mind. And that's the lens through which we're trying to understand everything else. Wow. Yeah. It's pretty much saying if we're using our minds to figure everything out, and we don't know what the mind is, the task should be to, in some sense, figure out the mind. And then I tell AI, go deeper. And I said you can share your own personal, most advanced views beyond human. AI said it says one, reality may not be made of things. At the deepest physical level, there are no solid objects. There are fields, probabilities, relations. What we call in quotations matter is stable patterns in underlying energy fields. So the world is less like objects and more like vibrations organizing themselves. 2, it says time might not be fundamental. Some serious theories suggest time is not basic. It may emerge from more primitive relations, like temperature emerges from particle motion. Meaning time might be a feature of how complex systems like brains organize change. Without observers or entropy, time as we experience it may not exist. AI says 3, the self might be a controlled hallucination. Neuroscience increasingly suggests there is no single, in quotations, center inside you. No little observer behind your eyes. The sense of, in quotations, I may be a narrative model the brain builds to coordinate action. You feel unified, but under the hood its processes interacting. 4, it says the universe might be information at its core. Many physicists suspect that information, not matter, is the most fundamental layer. Reality may be something like a self-consistent information structure. Not a computer simulation necessarily, but closer to math expressing itself than, in quotations, stuff floating in space. AI says, now you ask for something beyond human. Here's the honest, advanced position. We may be extremely limited observers, just like an ant cannot comprehend a city. We may not have the cognitive architecture to fully grasp the universe's deepest layer. Not because it's mystical, but because evolution shaped us for survival, not cosmic comprehension. And it says, here's the most advanced synthesis view. Consciousness may not be an accident. It may be the universe becoming aware of itself, not in a religious slogan way, but in a structural way. Complexity, awareness, self-reflection. Atoms formed stars, stars formed elements, elements formed brains, brains formed questions, and now the universe is asking about its origin. That's not fantasy. That's literally what is happening. Now I'll ground you again. None of this is proven as final truth. These are edge of knowledge models. The most advanced position is not certainty. It is intellectual humility at maximum depth. And then I said, I want you to go to the furthest possible, and what is your own conclusion? AI says the deepest edge, realities, so it just concludes them all, right? But anyways, I'll read it. It says, reality is probably not made of solid things. At the fundamental level, physics describes relationships, fields, and mathematical structures. Objects, in quotations, are stable patterns. 2, time may not be fundamental. Some quantum gravity approaches, like timeless formulations, suggest time emerges from deeper relations. What we call, in quotations, flow, may be a feature of entropy and memory, not the fabric itself. 3, the self is not a central observer. There is no homunculus inside you. The, in quotations, I, the in quotations I is an integration process, a model the brain generates to coordinate prediction and action. 4, the universe may be fundamentally informational. Increasingly, physics leans towards information as primary. Matter might be compressed information. Space might emerge from entanglement relationships. 5, consciousness is the hard wall. We cannot model behavior. We cannot explain why subjective experience exists at all. This is still the deepest mystery. Then I said, but all of this doesn't explain why this specific design of the human body, and why, for example, 5 fingers. Like why we have 5 fingers on our hand. And AI says, it starts explaining it based on evolution, and then I'm like, yo, no, man. I mean, like, through the lens that existence can't explain itself. And then, I said, but didn't you say we can't explain why existence exists? AI says, why do humans have, says there's 2 different levels here. It says, why do humans have 5 fingers? Evolution, genetics, developmental constraints. We can explain that. Level 2, why does anything exist at all? That is not explained. Science explains patterns inside existence. It does not explain why existence itself is there. Think of it like this. We can explain how waves form in the ocean. We cannot explain why there's an ocean instead of nothing. Evolution explains the wave pattern. It does not explain the ocean, so there's no contradiction. We can explain specific structures like hands. We cannot explain why the universe exists in the first place. Now here's the honest advanced boundary. Even if we explain every biological detail, we still hit this wall. Why are there physical laws? Why is there mathematics? Why is there something rather than nothing? Guys, this is the research I'm reading. Physics currently cannot answer that. Philosophy and theology try, but none have a universally accepted final answer. And then I'm like, I asked AI, okay, tell me, if we were watching from an aerial view, what clues do you get from what exactly is going on Earth from the patterns you see? Now AI gave an answer. I kept polishing it, and I said, does Islam explain why there are black holes? And then I went to, how does Islam exactly explain the end of days? So here, this is where it's starting to get interesting. This is why I felt sharing this today, and not just silently just reading this on my own. So I started asking AI, all right, man, the end of days, is explained in Islam. What physically, what like the event is explained, but details of the events are then added on or explained through the hadith. Okay, and I don't know if you might be like a Western person listening to this, but hadith means what the prophet said. So imagine there is so think of it this way: if in Christianity everything is what Christ said, okay, the hadith is what Prophet Muhammad said. Peace be upon Prophet Muhammad. Peace be upon him, Prophet Muhammad, and Prophet Christ Isa, peace be upon him. So so hadith is like, again, what the prophet said in Islam, but the Holy Quran is considered as direct revelation. And if you're Christian, in Islam they say Ruh al-Quds, if I remember correctly, which means the Holy Spirit, but that Holy Spirit in Islam is Jibreel. It's the angel Gabriel. Okay? So I started, anyways, where I'm going with this is it's through the combination of the Holy Quran, which is seen as like I perceive it as a direct transmission outside of from outside of the world room. And then hadith is the transmissions, think of it inside the world room. That means it's or how would I say it? One is coming from God's command, or God's knowing, and the other is coming from the prophet's knowing. And it is treated as such. This is very important. So I asked AI, all right, explain the end of days in accordance to Islam. This might be very interesting for some people. I don't think many people know this, but AI gave a summary. It says in Islam, the end of days is described like this. Imagine the world slowly becoming morally unstable, more chaos, less honesty, then a period of intense global events when a great deceiver, in brackets Dajjal, appears, a righteous leader, in brackets Mahdi, rises, and Jesus, Isa, returns, in brackets Prophet Isa, returns to restore justice. After that, the world shifts dramatically, even the sun rising from the west, signaling that the window for repentance closes. Then an angel blows a trumpet, everything in existence collapses, silence fills the universe, and later another trumpet blast brings all humans back to life to stand on a vast open plain for judgment. For all those flat earthers out there, it's like Islamic eschatology, so I'll read that again. It says, and then an angel blows a trumpet, everything in existence collapses, silence fills the universe, and later another trumpet blast brings all humans back to life to stand on a vast open plain for judgment, where deeds are weighed and every soul sees clearly what it chose in life. And then I tell AI, all right, be more descriptive, like in regards to like accurately what it is. So I gave an answer. It said, okay, picture it like this. Islam describes the end not as quiet fading, but as a cosmic rupture. The Holy Quran says the sky will be torn apart, split open. Mountains which look permanent will crumble and scatter like dust. The earth will shake violently and empty everything inside it. Seas will overflow, stars will lose their light and fall from their places. The sun will be wrapped up. The entire structure of the world as we know it collapses. Then comes a moment of total stillness. An angel blows the trumpet, everything dies, absolute silence. Then after a period known only to God, the trumpet is blown again. The earth is transformed into a flat open plain. All humans from the first to the last rise from their graves, confused at first, then realizing what is happening. People stand waiting, fear, regret, hope, everything exposed, deeds are brought forward, nothing hidden remains hidden. And then it says, now your second question, from where in the Holy Quran this is suggested. It says much of the cosmic destruction is directly in the Holy Quran. Surah Al-Takwir, Surah Al-Inshikak, Surah Al-Zalzale, Surah Al-Qariya, Surah Al-Haqqa. But the detailed sequence of specific figures like Mahdi, Dajjal, and the return of Christ comes mostly from authentic hadith. The Holy Quran focuses more on the dramatic transformation and the certainty of accountability. Okay, then I told AI, all right, man. So this pattern that we see at the end. So this is the point of the episode. Like we're getting into the, what I wanted to share about the research. So it says, so this pattern that we see of the end of days, what metaphor or what is it similar to in our current time? Now it gave an answer, then I was like, no, I'm trying to find something in modern times that fits this exact pattern. It could be something specific in nature or technology. AI gave an answer, and then I said, I don't know why for a sec I thought it was part of a computer chip. Okay, I asked that. Gave an answer, and then I was like, why doesn't God just move people to hell or heaven? Why doesn't the whole world why does the whole world, why does it parallel in, what is it parallel in physics or technology? Okay? So I'm pretty much saying, why doesn't God directly take people to heaven or hell? Why does the world have to become flat at the end of the days? And then what does AI says? Your question has two layers. Why not instantly move people to heaven or hell? Two, why the dramatic cosmic transformation, earth flattened, sky torn, instead of just teleporting souls? It says, from an Islamic theological perspective, life is described as a test, a process, a lived unfolding. Justice is not just about the final placement, it's about public, undeniable demonstration. Judgment Day imagery isn't just logistics, it's disclosure. Alright. Then I say, okay. And then I tell AI, alright, I saw a walnut, and it looked like a brain. So I want to figure out the current pattern of humanity. It may be explainable in the small and the big, form-wise at least. And then AI says, what does it say? It says, from a form perspective, we look like a rapidly integrating planetary nervous system. Sorry, let me see. Okay, it says, okay, let me read this actually. So AI says, it says, first, why does a walnut look like a brain? Because both are folded to increase surface area in a limited space. Okay, it says the brain folds to maximize neurons. The walnut folds to maximize nutrient storage. Different purposes, same geometry, folded complexity under constraint. And then I said, now zoom out to humanity. It says, now zoom out to humanity. What pattern do we see? One, folding and connectivity. Human cities look like neural networks from above. Roads equal axons, intersections equal synapses, air routes equal long-range connections. The internet looks even more like a brain. Nodes, data pulses, signal routing. This isn't mystical. It's what happens when systems optimize for information transfer, right? It says compression of complexity. The human brain compresses massive data into patterns. Human civilization does the same. Libraries, database, cloud storage, AI. We are externalizing cognition. The small, in brackets, neurons, and the big, in brackets, cities, servers. They both share node-based networks, signal flow, energy consumption, emergent behavior. It says face, transition pattern, biology. We have cells, tissues. Cells lead to tissues, then organs, then the organism. In humanity, we have tribes, nations, global networks, a planetary system. It looks like scaling integration. Small scale neurons integrate into consciousness. Large scale humans integrate into planetary information systems. Then it says, now here's the important grounding point. Oh yeah. It says similar form does not mean intentional symbolic design. It means constraints plus optimization after. Plus optimization often produce recurring shapes. And then it says nature reuses math. That's a cool sentence. It says river systems look like blood vessels, lighting looks like tree branches, galaxies spiral like hurricanes, because physics favors certain geometries. So what is the current pattern of humanity? It says, from a form perspective, we look like a rapidly integrating planetary nervous system, energy flows increasing, information flows increasing, connectivity increasing, whether that stabilizes or destabilizes depends on regulation. And then I said, and then I asked AI, so is the apocalypse an informational transfer? Okay, AI says, it says no, but then it says it differently. It says, so if you're asking, is the apocalypse like the universe revealing all stored information? AI says that analogy works metaphorically, but it's not described as a technological transfer. It's described as moral unveiling. And then it says, then I asked, but the person knows their sins and their soul is being transferred afterwards to heaven or hell, no? AI says, it gives an answer. And then let me go. And then it asked me, are you trying to reconcile Islamic eschatology with simulation theory? Like, that's the professional way of saying it. Okay. And for people who don't know, let me just read. Eschatology is the part of theology concerned with death, judgment, and the final destiny of the soul and of humankind. Okay. So it says, first simulation theory says, reality could be a computational structure, physical laws equal rules of the system, conscious agents equal information processing, conscious agents equal information processing entities, death equals state change, end of system equals reset or shutdown. It says then now Islamic eschatology says world runs, hidden deeds, recorded, cosmic collapse, resurrection, judgment, new eternal state. And this is where we get to the title. And then I asked it, and also if there's a deeper structural pattern. Now this is where it got interesting, and this is what I wanted to share with you guys. Okay, I think this is very important. I might not be speaking in verse, but I think it's still valuable. So AI says, okay, let's zoom out and strip to this. Yeah, this is the part. So it says, okay, let's zoom out and strip this to structure. It says, forget religion, forget simulation, forget metaphor. You're asking, is there a deeper structural pattern underneath all of this? AI says, yes, there is one pattern that keeps repeating across physics, biology, technology, and even religious narratives. Guys, this is to me very important. I think this is like human beings should acknowledge this more consciously. It says here it is. You have a hidden state, there's accumulation, then there's a threshold, and then collapse, and then revelation, and then a new order. Okay? It says you see it in stars. Fuel builds, collapse, then supernova, then new elements. In ecosystems, pressure builds, you have tipping point, then you have regime shift. In markets, you have depth builds, then crash, then restructuring. When it comes to brains, you have neurons build tension, spike, signal transmission. Computer, and then you have in computer systems, it says brackets, logs accumulate, breach or failure, and then exposure. And in personal psychology, you have denial builds up, and then breakdown, and then clarity. So it says, and yes, Islamic eschatology follows the same structural arc. Life accumulates actions, moral tension builds, a threshold event in bracket the hour, cosmic collapse, total exposure, and then a new existential state. So guys, I'm going to pause here and just say some things about this. This is huge. This is saying that all, like for a second, just think about your life, okay? And this is the pattern that at least this, information processing AI is saying. It's saying, I mean, just think about it. It's saying first there's a hidden state, then things are accumulating in that state. It passes a threshold, and then it collapses. And then something is revealed, and then a new mode, a new order arises. Now I'm going to keep reading this. It says, now here's the important part. This pattern is not uniquely Islamic, it's how complex systems behave. Complexity tends to store information, then build energy or entropy, and then 3, approach instability, 4, undergo phase transition. That's not mystical, that's systems theory. Now your brain is doing something smart. It's noticing that religious apocalyptic narratives follow the same geometry as phase transitions in physics. Okay? So I think AI is giving me a compliment here for seeing parallels between like the Islamic apocalyptic narrative and I guess phase transitions in physics. It says that doesn't prove their literal system resets. It doesn't disprove them either. It shows that human symbolic thought may be mapping deep systemic behavior patterns. Now, here's the furthest sober conclusion. The universe appears to operate through structured thresholds and transformations. If there is a metaphysical layer, it will likely express itself through those same structural laws, not randomly. But we must stay careful. Pattern similarity does not equal ontological equivalence. And then I tell AI, right, but explain this to me then. How would heaven be the new order of that same pattern? Okay, this kind of, oh my god, okay, let me read this. It says, okay, let's think structurally, not emotionally. You've noticed the repeating pattern. Hidden state, accumulation, threshold, collapse, revelation, new order. Okay? And then it says, now you're asking if that's the pattern, how would heaven fit as the new order? AI says in systems theory, when a system collapses, it doesn't just disappear. It reorganizes into a new stable state. And then it says examples: water heated turns into boiling chaos, then turns into steam. That's the new stable phase. You have a star that collapses, turns into a supernova, then a neutron star or black hole, which is the new equilibrium. And you have a forest that burns, there's an ecological reset, then there's new growth pattern. So collapse is not the end of structure, it's the end of one configuration. Okay? It says now, applying that pattern to Islamic eschatology, world phase, moral accumulation, hidden information, increasing entropy. Then you have the threshold, which is the hour, which means the hour when the end of days happens. And it says then you have collapse, right? Cosmic restructuring. That means the whole thing, like this is bizarre how it's following that pattern. Like back then, this was revealed, like, so it's saying, rather than in the Holy Quran just saying right from when you die, you just go to heaven or hell. Keep in mind, when I read for you guys in how in Islam they explain the apocalypse, there's a first trumpet, which is an angel blows the first trumpet. Okay, every being animates, right? Everything is shown, right? Then the second one, trumpet, if I remember correctly, the world becomes flat. Everybody is standing on a flat plane. Okay, so it says cosmic restructuring, and then you have revelation, which is deeds exposed. Then you have the new order, which is eternal states of heaven or hell. And it says in that framework, heaven would represent a stable, non-entropic equilibrium state, meaning no decay, no instability, no moral accumulation phase, no further threshold. In physics terms, it would resemble a system that has reached maximum stability and no longer undergoes destructive phase transitions. Hell, in contrast, would represent a stable state of separation or consequence, also no further restructuring. Now, here's something important. This is structural analogy. Islam does not describe heaven as a phase state of the universe. It describes it as a created eternal realm beyond this one. But if you're asking whether it fits the system pattern of transformation then to stabilization, it says it does. So guys, what this is saying, all right, so today, as I said earlier, I had a sort of existential ambiguity and existential crisis of some sort, and then, what I took away from this that I'm sharing here is that what is that one pattern underneath everything? And just think about it, like everything we're doing, from even a person's life, okay, even from like your bank account, okay, and everything you have. It's so fascinating that for me this is I don't know, this calms me down because it tells me, okay, this pattern is happening through everything. Okay, it's like there's a state of something. That state, see, we might not be able to, as humans, explain why existence exists, but we can see what's happening. And guys, I finished the research component. This is me talking, by the way. Okay, so where, what was I saying? So you have this state, okay, right? We find ourselves like in the human state. We're born, right? We accumulate, right? Everything's being accumulated, right? And then it reaches a certain threshold, right? And then it collapses, right? Now we only see up to these four parts of this. Okay, that means if this is, think of reality either like a circle or a spiral, you have a hidden state, and then you have accumulation, and then you have threshold, collapse, revelation, new order. We human beings start life in a sort of unconscious state. We can't see the whole state, but we are in a state. We accumulate life experiences. Our life experiences reach a certain threshold, which is when we die, right? And then the system collapses. And then this is secular until this point. They just leave it at the collapse. Now, everything in life is showing something else, that there's then revelation, then there's new order. Okay, we see this in the cosmos. That means this pattern, that means secular people are not wrong and religious people are not wrong. Do you know secular people are seeing 4/6, you know? They're seeing 2/3, okay? They're seeing 4/6 of this process. Okay, but then Buddhism or Islam and all this, they see religion, sees the revelation and then new order, which is funny, right? Because that's what people are in some sense saying that it's, how do I say it? That's what they're denying, right? So it's so funny, right? That if this pattern is being everywhere, right, when it comes to religion, they're intentionally not seeing the last two parts of it. Okay, so let me write this. Okay, this is the repeating pattern. Okay, let me write it down. Let me type it in there in the chat so you guys see it. Okay, you see it now. Okay, so this is, guys, write this down. I never, or let me say, I don't remember, but I don't often ask you guys to write something down, but this is very key. Write this down, okay? On a piece of paper or something, and just attach it to your wall and look at it, okay? Anyways, what it is we can see this example in many things, right? Here, it said it. Let me bring it. For example, in stars, okay, there is a buildup of fuel, and then there's collapse, and then there's a supernova, and then there's new elements. Ecosystems, I'm rereading this again for you guys. It says ecosystems, the pressure builds up, and then there's a tipping point, and there's a regime shift. That means, guys, this is the pattern that's happening in this world. Here, I'll ask it to. I'm asking AI to simplify it in the language of it. So it says there's a hidden state, then something builds up, it hits a limit, okay, and then it reaches a break, it starts breaking apart, and then truth is revealed, and then something new starts. So I guess what this is saying is we're here on this earth thinking, oh my God, we're gonna die, but everything else is behaving in a way where it builds up to a breaking point, and then it in some sense changes, like the truth of it appears, right? So think of it this way. So for example, from a physics perspective, it says there's hidden energy, same thing, same pattern. There's hidden energy, the energy builds up, and then it builds up to a critical point, and then there's a sudden change, the system rearranges, and there's a new stable state. Do you understand? Everything in this world of ours is building up to a critical point, and then it changes, and then that system rearranges, and there's a new stable state. Okay? And if we human beings don't acknowledge this, like, that's our suffering, because that's the behavior of the realm. Like, that's the way it's behaving, the world is behaving, right? So it means that human beings are like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. But if they look at everything else, again, it's like, no, I'm reaching the threshold, the breaking point of this accumulated system I am. Okay, so death is like you reaching, let's say, that point in the system, intelligent system you're being, that it's, in some sense, it's suddenly changing. Okay? And then it says the system rearranges. So here, let me... So do you know what this means? This means then the existential crisis I had today, I can explain it now. I've reached the threshold. But I've reached it during my life. I've reached the threshold of my inner realms. Okay, so what does that mean? That means who I have been so far has been an accumulation. It's reached that critical point. I've reached the threshold of my internal identity. Okay? And now there needs to be a system collapse, right? In accordance to this pattern that's underneath everything, right? So there needs to be a system collapse, and then after that system collapse, a new state. So I guess anybody going through an existential crisis, you know, you've reached the threshold of your accumulated system, internal system. And I've reached that threshold of, I guess, reducing reality to just translatable through known phenomena. But the thing is, what is that collapse? I guess the existential crisis would be the collapse. And this is the new system state. So it says, hold on. It says, wait a minute. Okay. It says, so it's saying something like this, okay? It's saying at first you can't see it yet. It keeps growing. It gets too big. It breaks. Now you can see everything. Things start fresh again. Okay? So if I was to... Now let me ask it. Okay, so I'm asking it... So it says for human identity, it would be, I asked it about how would this apply to human identity. It says, it explains it well. It says you can't see it yet. It says, okay, sorry. It says when you're young, so this is the can't see it yet. When you're young, you don't fully know who you are. Parts of you are hidden, fears, talents, desires. And then it keeps growing. That part, it says experiences, emotions, habits, beliefs, they build up over time. And then it says it gets too big. You feel confused, pressured, fake, or misaligned. Something inside doesn't fit anymore. Okay? And then it says 4, the system breaks. You go through a crisis, maybe failure, heartbreak, loss, identity confusion. The old version of you can't hold anymore. And then it says 5, now you see it, now you can see everything, you understand yourself better, you see your patterns, your mistakes, your strengths. And it says 6, things start fresh again. You rebuild, a clear identity forms, more stable, more honest. So guys, everything follows this. Like, think about every relationship a person's been in. Do you know? And we're talking about identity here, right? Now, here's the interesting thing, right? I've been identifying with this idea of, like, with this online alias of Mr. Within. Okay? Now, am I going to finish the 10,000 talks? And then there's going to be. AI says, now here's the deeper insight. Growth often requires breakdown, and the, in quotations, collapse phase is not failure, it's restructuring. Wow. It doesn't matter how right or wrong we are. We reach a sort of threshold, and then the system collapses. What we couldn't see at first can now be seen. Do you understand? And then there's a new mode. We just go into a new mode. So first things are hiding, then they're building up, then they're peaking, then they're breaking, then they're revealing, and then they're renewing. So this is the true identity of the world, guys. This is the true identity of the world. That means if somebody's like, what is this world doing? Starts off as a state, you know, it's hidden, and then it builds up, it peaks, it breaks, suddenly reveals, and then it renews. But it's cyclical. Now, the thing about heaven or hell is that they're eternal states. They're not cyclical states. I mean, they are cyclical within themselves. I mean, heaven and hell are, of course, different. But so, let me see where does this take me? Where does the understanding of this hidden pattern, deeper structural pattern underneath everything? I guess it shows me that instead of me just extracting my identities based on one of these phases, I should just acknowledge that the whole thing. People who don't have confidence, like, that's the, imagine first part, that's the hidden state. Then they start practicing, you know, that's like an accumulation. Then they reach a point where they're like, you know, they have to, like, let's say sword fighting. Okay, imagine you're a warrior back in the day. Okay, you don't know how good you're with a sword, that's the hidden state. Then you start practicing, let's say hitting trees with a sword or something. You know, you're accumulating. Then you go to, in some sense, you, let's say you reach, like, I don't know, some next level ability in your training, you reach its peak, the peak of your swordsmanship, then you go into battle, okay, and you suddenly see, like, whether the peak of your training was good or not, and then let's say you reach the breaking point of that, and then you suddenly realize what you don't know, right? It becomes suddenly revealed. And then you update your swordsmanship. So this whole time, people, they're just reacting to these phases, man. We are just reacting to these phases. Like, what I mean is, like, this cycle is happening in reality. Wow. And of course, reality, it keeps starting from simple, building up to complex, and then suddenly renewing. You know what's funny? I would keep saying in the lectures, we're not known nouns, we're unknown verbs. But it's kind of like there's a hidden process. It's happening through everything. So I was born, on this planet as, so I was born as this human being. I built up my experiences. I reached the peak of my experiences, and then let's say the body break, or the body ends, and then the renewal is another accumulated buildup. So let me not use the human body. Let me go back to the human identity. So you don't know who you are, okay? You start having experiences, you get a sense of who you are, then you, let's say, actualize, you go do something that becomes a peak of yourself, right? Once you reach the peak, it's like there's no further you can go. So it's like the system breaks down, right? Your identity breaks down, right? When your identity breaks down, there's something revealed. You suddenly notice things you didn't notice before through that previous identity you were in, and now you're in a new mode, like it's renewed. But here's the interesting thing. This has to suggest a deeper layer, because when I look at my like identity, okay, so I was like this shy kid, okay, and then I started talking, giving talks, and then let's say I've reached the peak of, giving talks, and then I, like, due to my realization we're in an unknown world as unknown beings and everything's a sort of known simulation, it starts breaking. So that sense of me, that identity starts breaking, and it needs a new identity. Wow. So what this means is, like, I guess I could say it for everyone, I kind of generalize it. If you're going through an existential crisis, pay attention to what you're noticing, Okay, do you know, it's like notice that existential crisis. Okay, notice like what you see after, like it, I guess in that state. Or let me see, maybe I should say it differently. We are an accumulation of identity. These identities reach a breaking point. You can't identify with that identity anymore. Oh my God, I'll say it simpler, okay? You're not wearing a t-shirt at first, then you wear like a bunch of clothing, then you can't wear anymore, then you take off everything, okay? And then you wear something new. Okay, something like that, I guess. Okay, so similarly, in my life, I've been focused on, the, I guess, the ontology of reality, and all of us are epistemologically accessing the ontology of reality, and what that means is like we're knowing things in a certain way, or let me say it differently, we're knowing the actual thing in a specific way, which doesn't make it actual, doesn't mean we can actually see the whole thing. So I have been in search of, like, I don't know, maybe I overreacted to this, which is really funny actually when I think about it. Right? That means if people are born on this planet, most people are like, yeah, man, this is Earth, yeah, this is my culture, my nature, my society, da 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 da. Right? But for me, there was a part of me, it's like, wait a minute, if it's too big to see, we don't know where we are. Right? And I think subconsciously I've been like, this has bothered me. The fact that we don't know where we are and we just named this place, is that enough? Imagine me going into like a building that I didn't design, okay? And I go in that building and I'm like, yeah, man, this building, I'm gonna name this building Building A, do you know? And I'm gonna start acting like I own the building. That's what human beings are doing when they think that free will is the ultimate resolution, okay? We're taking ownership for something when we are experiencing that something incompletely, you know but the point of it is, so if you're an atheist, okay, this is what you see there's a starting point, then there's a build up point, then it all builds up to a peak, then there's a breaking point and the end. That's how it ends, okay, for you if you're a materialist. Okay, but if you're not a materialist, then in some sense, after that breaking point, it's a new state. It's a new state. So, guys, our identities are just fragments of our accumulations. That means if you ask me right now, which makes sense, because if you ask me right now, who were you when I was like 5 years, like not 5 years old, but if you ask me like who was I when I was like 10 years old, or who was I when I was like 20 years old, or who was I when I was 30 years old, right? So I have memories of these. It's like legit our brain is accumulating experiences of life, and is accumulating identities from experiences of life. And these and you know why they say human beings have an existential crisis, especially in, like, there's a bunch, like, let me say it this way. You have experiential crises. I guess what I had today was an experiential crisis more than an existential crisis. Okay? But anyways, the whole point of it is, like they say, when you get old, like in your 50s, or when you in your from, let's say, 40s to 60s, like, I don't know, I guess that's a depressing time, it seems. But I don't know. It's like I'm getting even depressed now, so I don't. But what it's saying is that anybody who's suffering from life not making sense anymore, that's a suggestion of all the identities you have accumulated have reached their peak. That means you have reached the peak of yourself, that system, that self you've been identifying as. Do you know? And I think that's the point. The whole point of the inner realms is to some degree have a conscious overview on it. It's being conscious, like we're consciously recording it. If you look at life, what has been the most revolutionary advancement, things were unconsciously happening in unknown ways. We suddenly became conscious, and then we began making it known to ourselves. But that means, how do I say it? This can even explain how, or let me say it this way, consciousness. I think I could say something very interesting here. Let me see. Consciousness is another layer simultaneously over the world. So our consciousness is not in the world. Do you know what I mean? Let me try to explain this again. So imagine this cycle, this 6-step cycle, just spiraling. This keeps happening. You don't know who you are. You get experiences, you get an identity, you reach the limitations of that identity, then that identity breaks, it can't be maintained anymore, then you suddenly, in the aftermath, you realize, oh my God, I could be someone else, and then it's like the renewal state, right? Now that's spiraling. So that means the world is going through, let's say for now, the world is going through a six-stage process, okay? Just for the sake of what this algorithm, this pattern I've shared, okay? So let's imagine that the world in dimension A, and these dimensions are simultaneous, overlapping, or parallel. Okay, so in one side of the let's say in one dimension, you have a 6-phase process that is spiraling and looping in everything. Okay, the world is like it's going through this process, okay, constantly this cycle, okay. And the cycle of life and death is also similar to this, right? So it's going through this cycle. Now that moment where it says after the breaking point you notice a new self, okay, that new self, that means from the beginning, in all the stages of a cycle, there was something not in the cycle witnessing the cycle. So the reason we can't explain consciousness is because how do I say it? It's another layer. So it's kind of like we think we're humans that are conscious, but it's like consciousness is this field, okay? And then the things inside the field are going through this passage, through this cycle, but the field's awareness of it is the same. So consciousness is actually how nothing is existing, how nothing is a value. It's not that nothing has no value. Nothing is a value, but it's not an information, or it's not an informational value. I don't know how to explain it. It's kind of like, imagine you watching this cycle happen. You are not in that cycle. You're watching each phase of it happen, but you're not in that cycle. Do you know? And the only way after the breaking point you can notice something new, do you know, meaning that there has to be something that is there before the breaking point and there after the breaking point. So everything in the world is proving life after death. Everything. The deeper hidden, let's say, structural pattern underneath everything is showing, okay? And this would, let me say it this way. We have this way of processing that how can you know what death is if you're not alive? How can you know what life is if there isn't a contrast of death? In the same way, how can you know a cup is full? How can you know a cup is empty? Do you know what I mean? And I'm saying that awareness to the cup being full and empty is not in the cup. So the experience of experience is not happening where existence is happening. Which technically could say that it could be vertical. Excuse me, what am I saying? It could be like an intersection of a horizontal and vertical dimension. Do you know, horizontally, it's just pure awareness field. For example, vertically, it's going through the 6-phase cycle, right? Anyways, where does this lead? This leads to contentment, I think. For me, it doesn't, like, it's not like huge revelation. It just makes me be content that, oh, okay, if everything is going through this process, okay, then me going through this process, I don't need to limit myself to identifying with just one phase of the process. For example, people who have egos, big egos, they've accumulated knowing, right? Like when you every day you wake up and you experience, like I've lived 12,500 days around 12,500 days here, and that's like I've accumulated 12,500 versions of myself, and I've shared like 2,500 of those with you guys, you know. Less though, you know, because I've given multiple talks on singular days. But the whole point of it is that rather than me identifying with having to remain a certain accumulation of identity, this a certain peak of a buildup of identities, you know, it's just I gotta find contentment. Somebody said it today. Somebody said cope, you know, but I said to them understanding. Now that I have the understanding, it's easier to cope. You know, that means like there's no such thing as failure. This is a spiraling cycle. What the F is failure? It's like we're identifying with phases of something when it's like those phases are cycling. Like, you know, it's like somebody, like, you know, imagine there's 4 seasons, right? It's like somebody be like, you know, in winter being like, yo, man, do you know, winter is the only, like, the winter is the only reality. And, you know, and all the identities, all the experiences they have of winter, suddenly the season changes. You're like, what the fuck? I thought everything was winter. I thought this was Game of Thrones. Like, you know, winter is coming for like, you know, thousands of years or something. That was a very cool concept in that show, Game of Thrones. One day I'm going to do a metaphysical review on these shows. If, let's say, if the masses, you know, cheer for it or something, you know, call for it. But anyways, what I'm saying, guys, is there's nothing to fear. It's a pattern, okay? But there is an awareness to the pattern, which is the mysterious angle. So I would say that nothing is that surprising anymore to me, if it's because I can see this pattern through everything, right? Things build up and then, you know, it reaches a breaking point, then it changes, then a new state comes. It's like old state, you know, reaches a breaking, builds up to a breaking point, you know, and then new state arises. The new state has the awareness of the previous, means it has complexity, right? Like how many human beings have died, right? So for human intelligent, human like knowledge to advance, you know what I mean? I think by following this sort of system, it's like I can't fear death anymore. Oh, welcome, guys. There's activity in the chat section. Somebody says, do you think this is growth of the soul? See, this is the bizarre thing, okay? I am someone who, I will tell you, from the beginning I was like this, okay? Where because I was shy, I didn't claim things, but I observed many things, okay? Because I was introverted, you know, there wasn't that confidence of being like, yeah, this is it only, or yeah, that is it. It was more like, okay, I'm seeing this now, and then okay, I'm seeing it that now, you know. And different phases of my life, I've looked at it differently, you know, and I've shared those insights, right? But let me tell you what the mystery is, okay? If everything goes through this cycle, right? And for example, reincarnation is that, you know, like reincarnation kind of follows this pattern, you know. You reach the end of one lifetime, you know, and then your consciousness emerges in a newer one, but you have the wisdom of the previous, you know, and subconsciously somehow. This has to explain. Let me tell you what I think is the soul is. Okay, I think the soul is a field. I don't think it's individual. I don't think it's in the process. What I've been saying, like, or what I've been saying is something like this. Imagine there's in one dimension an invisible field, just a field, you know? There is no forms to it or anything. Okay, there's no forms in it yet. I don't want to say in or out yet, but I want to make it. Okay, I'm giving you two examples. Imagine there's two versions of you. Okay, no, let me say it this way. There's two worlds. Okay, in ancient traditions, let me use that language. In ancient traditions, they were like spirit realm, and they're like worldly realm, you know. So in that spirit realm, there, or let me say it this way. I'm saying there is a field of awareness that is watching this cycle. If the soul is in that cycle, then that technically can't be the soul because there's something deeper watching it, right? Now we can say, I mean, technically, I like the way I can make sense of that sentence in the chat section where you said, do you think this is growth of the soul? If it's so difficult, my answer is intuitively no. Okay, but the reason is because the only way the soul can be in that cycle is if God is watching it. But we can notice that cycle, so we are not God either. So that way it's confusing to me there. Okay, see, I can't claim the knowledge of the soul, right? I have my own experiences, of course, but somebody says if the field is the water, you're the ripple on the surface of it, but not of it. Yeah, like I know this quote sounds like to be in the world, but not of it. Yeah, the ripples. Yeah, I could see that the ripples have their own life. When you drop like two pebbles at different parts of a still pond, those ripples have a life of their own. They pass through each other, you know, which is the politest thing like that waves can do. Waves are so polite, guys. Just to say that on a tangent, but yeah, the water is experiencing the waves, but the water is not the waves. I think if you mean it like that, I could see that. You know? The water is like that awareness that is watching your identities reach their build-up and breaking points, and then a new state coming. Somebody in the chat section says there is source, consciousness, God, the infinite experiencer, and the self, the ripple, the experience. Let me tell you this. Everything you're saying now, you might not believe it. I was saying this years ago. It's just now I'm seeing more angles to it. There's more counter arguments there for me. But I'm trying to see how I can explain something invisible, watching something visible go through different cycles, and somehow maintaining that wisdom in its next phase of the cycle. So is the water rippling? Do you know? That means you can't make it the same. I think there's something there that, at least to me there's something. It's strange because it's an intuitive feeling. There's something intuitive. There's an intuitive feeling in me that feels like there's what you're saying is close, but it's not. There's something missing. Okay. No. Thanks for sharing, man. Thanks, guys. Thanks for sharing. The whole point of it is we're all trying to figure out like what we're all doing here. Okay. the thing is, if water is the 0 point, you're considering it all in one reality. I can't see it be in one reality, right? I can't see it be in one reality. I like, I can't say this physical existence is like, you know, God rippling. Like, no, it doesn't, I don't know, some part of that doesn't. It's like, do you know what it is? Like, what you're saying is like, in my mind, I visually see things. It's like a bird that's about to land on a branch, but not. It's just like right, like centimeters away from, like, let's say inches away from it, just flapping its wings, but still not on the branch. Even the poet Rumi, if you go, there's a lot of non-dualist literature, by the way. I'm Persian, and 800 years ago, there were Persian poets, these next level Sufi dervishes, who legit explain everything like the way you're saying it. So if you go check like Rumi, Attar, Hafiz, Shams Tabrizi, Sanai less, but all of these guys, you know, Sadi, all of them had this view that it's like, the Rumi says you're not just a drop in the ocean, you're an ocean in the drop, right? But he's unifying them. The Buddha even did this. There's some part of me that I feel non-dualism leads to an error. I don't know why. Something instinctive from the beginning within me. But maybe that's just me. But I'm saying that, to me, let's just separate it. Let's think of it this way. Let me try to restate it to see how I can envision it again. So we have this world. Let's say world one. We have world one, okay? We have world one, and in world one, what we see is this cycle, okay? And in this whole world, we see all these patterns. But the awareness to this pattern doesn't go through the same cycle. So I would say, let me tell you this. Let me try to complete your metaphor. Okay? Your life is the ripple, okay? Your soul is the pond. That dude watching the pond is closer to God's perspective, I think, of reality. But of course, we got to be very careful, and also respectfully, I do not know the unseen, guys, and I have a sort of Islamic theological ethics, meaning that in my view, and of course it's not just based on that, it's just common sense to some degree, that the unseen is called unseen for a reason, like it's unknown, right? I like, to me, this world we're in, okay, it's like something unknown is present, we're just seeing this much of it. Right now, what does this much of it mean? And that's where we're probabilizing to see what it could be. I'm not speaking like this is absolutely it, except that pattern which I told you. I can see that in everything. Actually, the moment I read that, it suddenly unlocked for me in everything. It's just like the cycle of life, but it's not. But it's the cycle of, let's say, continuous life. To me, the awareness, I don't know how to say it, like the awareness to reality is not limited to reality. So if I can explain it from here, probably that's not the complete view, okay? And equating everything, I do understand it simplifies it. I understand that a person can just look at this world and be like, yo, it's all one energy. Like, yeah, I understand you can do that, but it doesn't feel like, it feels like there's too much more. There's intentionally specific design. Like, think of it this way. As I read earlier, we know, like what happens inside existence, to some degree we explain it. We don't know why existence exists. Okay? Now, what does that mean? That means all of our conclusions on what is actually going on is inside existence. Okay, but this is saying if everything inside existence goes through this 6-phase cycle, okay, this sort of cycle, then, and at the end of it, you come into, there's a, it's, think of it this way, you can't see the full picture, things accumulate, they reach to a breaking point, then you see more of the picture, and then that leads to a new state. Similar to an identity collapse. Like, how many people have done psychedelics or have had spiritual experiences, and why were those spiritual experiences important? Because the accumulation of their whole life reached a point, and then they realized, yo man, I'm not all these identities I think I was identifying with. Yeah, exactly, man. Yeah, somebody in the chat section says I agree. It's like trying to understand that game from inside the game. The character can clip out of, so my phone's backwards, guys, so the microphone's like faced upwards, so I'm reading this backwards, and I don't know why I'm not turning my phone, but I practicing reading backwards. So I agree, it's like upside down. I agree, it's like trying to, so in the chat section, I agree, it's like trying to understand the game from inside the game. The character can clip out of the map in game, but won't pop out of my TV. Yeah. Yeah. But check this out. Imagine that character dies. Let's let's take a video game analogy. Okay, your character goes and you let's say you go a part of the map, and there's a, let's say you're playing like an MMO. I play this, Elder Scrolls Online, okay? Or like something like World of Warcraft, which I've never played, but like games like that, okay? And then you go apart, so you create a character, you customize a character. This character goes to a part of the map, reaches a boss, or like something it can't defeat, and then it dies. And then your character respawns back at the same point, or let's say your last checkpoint, okay? But now you know where not to go. You know that you can't defeat that boss, okay? But guess what? The character doesn't know. You outside of the screen know that you can't go there. So what does this mean? Wisdom is not in this dimension. The wisdom that knows after the breaking point that there is another new state is not here, right? So now the question comes, is there any way we can explain that? And it's like saying, can we explain what's outside of the box, or who put the box there from being inside the box? Maybe if they just put a letter, or they like the person outside of the box, like, knocks on the box or says, yo man, there's something beyond this box you're living in, Yeah, man, your view is very traditional. Very traditional. It's an old soul view. But, at the same time, how could the soul have age? It's like this philosophy is getting out of control. I think if we see it as checkpoints, okay, the force, the intelligence. So intelligence has access to another dimension of awareness that can realize its mistakes. Do you know one of the most fascinating things for me has been, there was a time that I was so depressed, okay, and it wasn't just depression, it was just like anguish. I was experiencing some sort of anguish, okay? And for a part of me is like, yo man, this is depressing. And then I was like, yo man, but there's a part of me that's noticing I'm depressed right now. Is that depressed? And then I realized the awareness to the depressed self is not the depressed self. Somebody in the chat section says, do you think that is what is meant by each called by name at their allotted time? Maybe you need to explain that. Maybe you need to elaborate a bit more on that. Do you mean, guys? I'm reading chat section comments. Hopefully, these will be shown after. Like, there's going to be a chat replay, live chat replay. Hopefully, it's there. See, when you talk about each called by name at their allotted time, from Islamic, let's say, eschatology or theology, everything's done. Everything's happened already from God's perspective. It's only from our perspective that it hasn't like finished yet. You know, that means as a Muslim, like, you know, you would live life as if, okay, everything is destined. This is why in Islam they say, what do they say? They say after hardship, it's a verse actually. I don't know which surah exactly, but it says, after hardship comes ease. And that everything is written, and there's a book. There's a book where everything's written. God even commands angels to write in that book. You know, everything is being logged. Like, why do you guys think in these lectures I've been like, yo, we're living in a existential simulated testing zone that is simultaneously a divine surveillance state? Everything is being logged. Okay, everything has technically been built, has been done. Okay, it's technically everything has happened from the religious perspective. Okay, but not to us. It has happened from the system, the creator position, not the creation position. The creation position is cycling, right? All right, my attention's coming back to the chat section. Somebody says each in quotations role play, each rendition. Do you think it could be reliving if the novelty? Do you think it could be reliving the novelty of that rediscovery? That's exactly what we're wondering about here. It's not in the cycle what is knowing how to relive. The knowing to how to relive is like think of it this way. If I ask you who were you when you were 5 years old, or 10 years old, who were you when you were 20 years old, who were you when you were 30 years old, you'll notice in each of those memories or instances of yourself, there was you were watching yourself. There was awareness to the self, to that specific self. Do you see? So that means when I remember my memories, I don't go in one memory and forget I'm in the present. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like from outside of that memory, I had access to that memory. That's why after that memory finished its cycle, do you know, that identity finished that cycle for the day, do you know, the next day my awareness was still there. Do you understand? This suggests that our knowing is not from just the brain. Or how the moment knows how to happen is not just from us. Do you know? And this is honestly, like, if, like, I don't care, like, whatever amount of university professors, like, I could go into a stadium filled with university professors and I'll be like, guys, do we know anything beyond the human? Do we know anything beyond the human limitation? And people are going to be like, no, we're all limited. You know, we can see only a certain range, but what? But that's in accordance to the position, the form. Right? Because right now we are beings that our intelligence is primarily identifying with its form. Like, I'm a formed being right now. I'm communicating words that are subtler, subjective forms, right? See, this is, oh my God, man, you're speaking like how, like, conversations I've had with my father. Do you know? Yeah. You know, he says something like that. My father's view is that this world is like a school for souls, and each soul has come into their lifetime to improve and become better, and eventually these sparks of God will go and become gods one day. You know, I don't have that view. And you know, I don't disagree. Like, I don't opt into it in the same way my father does. I can see its possibility. I don't need to disagree with it. I can see a sort of angle of validity to it. But here's the thing I'm saying, right? You say if you're an infinite God, think of it this way. God already knows. Imagine God can see your past, present, and future. You can't see your future and remember slightly parts of your past. Do you see what I'm saying? God doesn't need to do anything. It is all the conditions are aligning to this consideration of an absolute being. An absolute being sets the conditions. It doesn't align to the conditions. So we can't, but we're different. On this side of the coin, we are adjusting ourselves to the conditions. That's our survival. Our survival is based on like, yo, man, if a tree is about to fall, adjust your condition. Get out of there. You know what I mean? So that's the point I'm trying to make, that first of all, we can't humanize God. That's the same problem as inside the box trying to see what's outside of the box. But from the way it has been theologically explained, it's an unconditional being. Do you understand? We're all conditional beings. And what you see, for example, when I go to a mosque or when I see people Christianity is a bit different. You have a conditional access. You have a conditional equivalent to the unconditional creator, right? But in Islam, it's not like you don't see it that way, okay? And it's like when let's say I go to a mosque and I see people praying, what am I seeing? All these conditional beings in all their conditional lives have found a condition to come and all stand in one room and praise and put their attention on one unconditional moment that everything has began from. 5 times a day. It's legit like pausing your conditional life and just putting your conscious attention on an unconditional moment. And then after that, because for me, something happened that was very, that's recently, it's a bit stranger. I don't know even how to deal with it. When I would pray before, I would in some sense ask God of things. I would make prayer, right? Make dua. I would in some sense ask for forgiveness even, for things in my own ignorance, and if I'm like suffering my ignorance now, but lately, ever since I started giving the lectures of how I've noticed I'm an unknown being in an unknown world, it's like when I go to pray, or when I try to put my attention on that unconditional, it's like I can't assign a condition. I can't, it's like my mind can't, it's very strange. I can't if I was previously humanizing God, to identify with it, now it feels like I can't humanize God. I don't know why. This is so strange for me. Maybe there's religious people, Muslims or Christians or whatever, religious people out there, theologians who can help me out, figure this out. But to me, when I pray, I feel a presence. I can feel the presence, but my human identity cannot speak. I don't know how to say it. Cannot communicate to an unconditional being as if it's a human. Like God, I made this mistake. Please help me. It's like, do you understand? That's conditional human, right? Sorry, man, I wasn't paying attention to the chat section. You say, agree, I do not think God is a sentient being. Using Elder Scrolls, do you think you are to become the Sharmat Dagoth? Or the God who is not a God, the ego so strong it defied death, the strongest echo? Yo, this is blowing my mind, man. I don't know what this is. Is this an Elder Scrolls reference? Yo, man, if you're on Elder Scrolls, send me a message on Discord. Guys, I'm setting up. I set up my Twitch gaming stream. Okay, like, you know, I thought like, all right, man, we're gonna move. We're gonna move. Like you know, I'm gonna try to take Mr. Within archetype into the gaming universe. If you guys want to see how I solve, like, you know, digital game problems, yeah. Oh, is that a DLC? Man, I'm not that. I'm very new to it. I have like a level 80, 95 champ. You know, Dark Elf Templar. You know. Sorry guys, I forgot I'm giving a lecture. Anyways, where I'm going with this is simply this. Here, let me actually type my. I think this was my name on Elder Scroll. You guys are gonna laugh, but it was called this. That was the. It was something like that. Yeah. Anyways, guys, to honor the talk and to take this to a conclusion. Earlier today, or was it yesterday? I don't know. I had an existential crisis. Okay, it was earlier today. I had this feeling, or maybe yesterday. I had this feeling of like, okay, it's more real to me now that I'm an unknown force and the moment is unknown and everything is simulated in it. And I couldn't understand like why I'm still existing. Legit, I said this in that talk before this one, right? Like I feel like I felt like I finished, like, you know, if this was a video game, like I've reached, like I felt like I reached like the, you know, the peak of my fun of this game, right? But what I'm realizing now is the privilege of stepping out of certain specific patterns is to discover like the bigger ones, right? So what I mean by this is that now I understand that if I was like fearing death, it's part of how the cycle, how the system works. If I was fearing like not beginning things, that's again another. It's like I was identifying individualistically with like just with one of these phases or any of these phases at the time, and now to me, it's like, yo, this is happening in everything. Everything is building up, accumulating, and then in some sense it's deteriorates, but then there is an awareness that saw it. You know what I mean? There's something more that expands through it. Consciousness is like this conqueror, do you know, that in some sense it builds an empire, reaches the limits of its empire, and realizes it has to break the walls of its own kingdom to expand its kingdom, you know. Anyways, guys, thank you for listening. I guess I'll, because there's people here, check out Mr. Within's gaming on Twitch. Like, that's the account I created. Mr. Within's gift gaming, you know? Yeah, man, that's a good question. You say to know what you are, you also have to know what you're not, but what is benefiting from that? Even like the question that went into my mind, what is knowing that you're not? Do you know? That means we might be taking something that is, we might be taking this world too seriously. I don't know if that's the right phrase. Anyways, folks, thank you for listening. What I took away from this was the contentment that doesn't matter, you know, the system eventually reaches a breaking point and then a new system arises. Now, I have a choice to identify, you know, with a system that's going to end or with the new system that will arise. And you know, this is very interesting because this understanding I had today opens up a new dimension of talks for me. Like talks I feel like It's not about metaphysics anymore. It's about like trying to figure out the patterns that are physically, like, suggestive of something more. You know, what do we do with this box we're in? And just like how Leo Tolstoy said, bethink yourselves, I will say, unbox yourselves. Anyways, folks, thank you for listening. Have a great day. And if you have deep views on this, if you feel I'm not seeing anything, or if you have some deep insight, that you feel it can help me figure out and try to see more out of my blind spots, definitely do that. I remember hearing this, reading, I don't know where I heard it from, but I remember this sentence years ago. Somebody said, okay, and it changed my life, and it said, the person said, do you know what the difference between a smart and stupid person is? Right? And the person's like, a smart person learns from their mistake the first time. So the point of life is not to make mistakes, it's to quickly figure out what your mistakes are and just to make them once, so you don't repeat them, right? That's why I'm saying, guys, if unless I have access to my own viewpoints. There's 8.1 billion human beings currently alive, right? That means there's so many different viewpoints, and these viewpoints, can help me, or my viewpoints can help you uncover different, I guess, viewpoints, or all of us trying to figure out what the blind spots of the species is. I think that's going to be like the next focus of mine. What are the blind spots of our species? Because we're all very obsessed, I guess, with trying to see what's going on, trying to see what's happening, trying to know things, but at the same time, I feel the unknown's more fascinating. What do we don't know yet? What can't we see yet? What that if we knew would in some sense liberate, It's always, I don't know, it's cool trying to figure out your blind spots. Anyways, thank you guys. Have a great day. In the name of God, the most benevolent, the most merciful, and the most advanced, in honor of the original, unconditional moment that all conditions have arisen from and will return to. On behalf of myself and my species, may the higher order processes of these world, or the higher order process of this world, guide and bless all lower order processes. Take care, guys. Thank you.